Morning, everyone, and welcome to a special presentation. Resiliency Policy Creates Economic Opportunity. Supporting our regional economic recovery has been a focus at Douglas Magazine since COVID started, and sponsoring CIP's Rising Economy Week and this session aligns with our beliefs that collaboration is the key to rebooting our economy. My name is Lise Gorkas, and I'm the co-owner here of Page One Publishing, and we're the publishers of Douglas, the region's business magazine. We are joined today by the Honourable Lana Popham, Minister of Agriculture. Following her presentation, Emilie, Rosenroll, the CEO of South Island Prosperity Partnership, will be moderating the discussion. Lana has represented Saanich South as the MLA since 2009, most recently serving as a Minister of Agriculture in John Horgan's government. As Minister, she's worked hard to promote local food and support local farmers with the initiatives like Feed BC, Grow BC, and Buy BC. So thanks in part to her work, the BC agriculture and food processing sector had its highest revenue ever in 2019, meaning more money in the pockets of local farmers and entrepreneurs, and for us, more delicious BC products enjoyed by all us British Columbians. Lana's record of achievement was also recognized by the Times Colonist, which awarded her the Reader's Choice Award for Hardest Working MLA in 2019. Before becoming MLA, you might not know that Lana was a farmer and a small business entrepreneur, starting the first certified organic vineyard on Vancouver Island. So please give a warm welcome to Lana Popham.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here today. Really appreciate the invitation. And I'm speaking to everybody from Cordova Bay, which is the traditional territory of the WSÁNEĆ peoples. I want to thank Emilie for reaching out during this strange interim period where we haven't quite been sworn in yet again as government, but I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. I just love the work that the South Island Prosperity Partnership is doing. And I've been an attendee at Penwar conferences as well. So I really appreciate that partnership that's happening during this conference today. As the MLA for Saanich South, newly re-elected, I couldn't be more proud of the area that I represent. And you know, the reflection of the diverse economy definitely happens on the South Island, but of course as well in all of British Columbia and definitely the entire Pacific Northwest. So this partnership today is important for that reason. This has been unquestionably a very difficult year for everyone. I think the word unprecedented is continually used because we almost don't know any other word to describe how unexpected this was. I think the challenges have been so enormous. We see now the second wave of COVID hitting, and the wear and tear on people is incredible. But I also think that there's been identification of incredible opportunities that are coming from this. And so the idea about resiliency is bringing forward economic opportunities that we hadn't identified in the past. Those gaps have shown up, and we see incredible business people, entrepreneurs taking the lead on trying to fill those gaps. And I think that's going to be an enormous part of our successful recovery. Everyday businesses and business people are putting forward new ideas to government and not necessarily looking just for financial support, but more asking government to be the wind at their back and removing barriers so they can get on with creating and being part of this new resilient economy. The British Columbia government's Stronger BC plan is the next step that we'll be taking in BC's economic recovery. And our plan is about resiliency, and it's about supporting and setting the BC businesses up for future successes. We've spent a lot of time prior to the last election talking to businesses, making sure we understand what measures that we could take that would be most helpful. And I think it was clear that strong public investment is needed beyond the tax measures and business grants that we had already been working on to help stimulate the economy before the election happened. We believe that creating opportunities and making significant investments in infrastructure like roads, hospitals, and housing is also going to allow for some stability in the economy. And so for the past three and a half years, I have been absolutely thrilled to be the Minister of Agriculture. My file included fisheries and food processing, beverage processing, and primary growing of agricultural products. And so I've seen firsthand the importance of resiliency and the role that government policy can play. The work that we did up till the time when the pandemic was upon us, there had already been a lot of work done on being more self-sufficient and creating more regional economic opportunities. And so once the pandemic struck, that work seemed even more important. And I think the work that we did prior to that is now paying off. The record-breaking numbers that we see from 2019 are indicators that the food, beverage, and fish processing economy is it's growing not just in British Columbia, but we see this as a trend in North America and worldwide. It's something that investors are looking at as positive places to invest money. And our population of our world is growing. And so we're definitely not going to be running out of eaters anytime soon. And so if we can figure out how to provide food in a resilient and self-sufficient sustainable way, then I think that we're always going to be on the right track. But it's how do you figure out how to support food entrepreneurs from a government policy perspective? There's big numbers that are coming out of British Columbia alone. $4 billion in sales, a 13% increase over 2018 in the agriculture sector. And there's 63,000 people that work in that sector here in BC. So when the pandemic struck, we definitely saw a lot of fear in consumers and questions that were being asked about whether our food system was going to be interrupted, and were we going to be able to find the things that we need just to feed ourselves and our families while everything else seemed to be shutting down. Our government declared food processing, farming, essential services. So we didn't see that shut down, but of course, given the need to try and control the spread of the pandemic, there was definitely different protocols that were put in place that were costly for businesses. And just the fact that we didn't have access to enough PPE at the time, and then the expense that that was bringing into the economic plans of businesses, where it was unexpected and difficult to manage. And so we stepped up to help in that way. But along with our 63,000 people that work in the industry here, we also bring in up to 12,000 people outside of British Columbia to help us with our primary crops. And so when you consider all of that was happening, and then what I like to say, very enthusiastic shopping by consumers. Some people like to use the word hoarding, but I like to use the word enthusiastic. We saw shelves were actually going bare. It wasn't necessarily about us running out of food, but it was definitely, there was disruptions in our supply chain. And so just trying to grapple with that and making sure that doesn't happen again allowed us to fall back on some of the policy work that we had been doing prior to the pandemic. And so how do we create a more stable food supply that takes advantage of the power of regional production, processing, and job opportunities? We decided to embrace our hospital food system, institutional food system, as one of the ways to try and bring stability into a new type of BC food system. And so we came up with a plan called Feed BC. And Feed BC is a way to access more regional primary goods, processed goods, and move them through the institutional procurement process. So this is something that is a massive shift in policy. But, and we spent 2 years just trying to figure out how to create that shift. We also had to be very aware that we couldn't go out and say that our health authorities had to buy 100% British Columbia food, because of course we get into some tricky territory with trade agreements. And so we've used words that are more encouraging. So we encourage health authorities to look at locally made food, grown and processed food. And we had about a quarter of what they were purchasing from BC prior to implementing this policy work. And up until just before the election, we were moving past 30% in a lot of cases. And so I don't believe that we're going to ever get to 100%, and nor should we. But I think if we can continue it moving, we're going to see a lot of opportunities for farmers and stability when the economy gets interrupted like it has with the pandemic, but it could get interrupted for other reasons as well. Especially in the food world, we see climate change interruptions in different jurisdictions around the world that will also affect what we can source. And so just in the health authorities in British Columbia, we've brought on 3 different health authorities officially. Fraser Health is a health authority that serves 5 million meals a year. So when you think about the implications of that, it's very significant, and it shouldn't be underestimated. And the blueprint that we're using to do this is something that can be used in other jurisdictions as well. So I was down at a Penwar conference a couple years ago, and we talked about the initial work that we had done on this. And we're very happy to share with any jurisdiction how we're doing this. And the best way to describe how to get inside institutional procurement program, we've decided after all the work that we've done that it's like having the need for a magic decoder ring for all parties involved, because there's so many different procurement languages being used that between farmers, the food processors, the health authorities, the different needs of different health authorities. Nobody really was able to talk in a way that had common language to know what's needed, who can supply it, and how do those suppliers work in a way that's acceptable to health authorities. So I'll give you one example of how this decoder ring idea worked. We have 5 different health authorities in the province, and they all generally use cooked chicken in their meals. And so they weren't able to purchase any cooked chicken that was being processed in British Columbia, because the companies that were creating cooked chicken were using sodium content that was too high and wasn't acceptable in the health authorities. But nobody had ever had that conversation before. Of course, there's an opportunity for processors to create a product with lower sodium, but they didn't know that that's why they were being left out of the procurement process. And so if you look at all of the different regions around BC that produce chicken, there's definitely opportunities for processors to supply into their local health authorities just by having the magic decoder ring to figure out exactly what they need to do to get into that system. And it's enormous. So 5 million just in one health authority. These are meals that are served 3 times a day. And they require many, many different ingredients. Health Authority in the Fraser Valley is also the home to the area that we grow a lot of berries, blueberries in particular. So if you just imagine, for example, if everybody was served a 1/4 cup of blueberries in their breakfast meal, that's moving a lot of product through a system. And so we started with the health authorities in this way because they're the toughest area for us to try and figure out how to move the dial. But because of the work we've done there, we've been able to move the dial in long-term care. And then moving outside of the health authorities, the post-secondary education world has much more freedom on what you can purchase. The allotment of funding to make those purchases is quite a lot different. And so one thing leads to another. And all of a sudden, everybody's speaking the same language. And we see different health authorities starting to embrace their local primary products and processed products in quite amazing ways. Up in the Interior Health Authority, the Penticton Hospital uses 600,000 shelled eggs a year, and they were not using British Columbia eggs, but because of our encouraging words, they started to look at doing that. And once they did that, we didn't know if we would really see much of a difference with our egg producers, because we work with a supply managed system here in British Columbia. But they wrote to us quite soon after and said that they had noticed a difference in their sales. So you see things like that, and that just allows our different regions to definitely become more resilient. Even if there was a disruption in one of those regions, the other regions, because of the way they're working now, I think could start to cross supply. And that's really important as well, making sure that there's those opportunities to grow the market you're supplying to. And that, of course, for us is British Columbia, but we would also like to be able to be creating institutional products to go outside of British Columbia. But again, it's not necessarily about competing between jurisdictions, because this lends itself to being very successful within your own jurisdiction as well. So from Feed BC, we also decided that we didn't have the availability of different types of processed products. So the second part of, I think, excellent policy, which is like the wind at the back of business people, is creating a food hub network. And so food hub networks are basically, they're a bricks and mortar building, which is a shared food processing center. And so it takes away barriers for food entrepreneurs in purchasing of equipment, renting of space, having business supports in place, and allows them just to take the ideas that they have and move into a food processing center. The system that we're using right now sets up the network by allowing people to enter these centers with a fob, and they're only charged a per minute rate on the equipment that they use. And so it's very feasible for a very small scale food processor to enter into a cutting edge facility and create the products that they want to create. We have 5 that are set up now, and with our recovery money, we have the availability to fund 7 more. So we'll have a dozen by the end of the year that we'll have announced. And I think that's really important. We have one in Salmon Arm, we have one in Port Alberni, we've got Vancouver, Langley, and one up in Quesnel in the Caribou. And so each one of these centers is tapping into their own regional entrepreneurship, and I think that's incredibly important. The food hubs, of course, they're not the bricks and mortar are not purchased by government, but government is budgeting money to help set up with the cutting edge equipment and 2 years of business supports. These regional food hubs, after about 3 years, can stand on their own, and the amount of businesses that operate out of them it's quite phenomenal. In Vancouver, there's one that houses 40 businesses 24 hours a day. And great examples of amazing products that start out in the food hub and then become so big they either sell their business and move on to something else, or they move outside the food hub to a dedicated facility that's just for their own products. So that again is, I think, a blueprint for success, for resiliency, and something that we've been talking to other jurisdictions about, because I think the more value-added food products are available out there, of course, that's good for business, but it's also excellent for consumers who are demanding more regional foods. We also, of course, keep in mind that with the value-added products, we really always want to be supporting the primary producers, and that's a more difficult thing, because you see farmers all around North America that, you know, the the hard work that they do doesn't always result in a lot of money in their pockets. And so being able to have a fair system where people, I think, have good business relationships together. We see, because of the food hubs, food entrepreneurs sourcing with farmers that they have personal relationships with, and I think that helps as well. It creates its own community, and I would say a friendly business environment, but also a business environment that's built on trust, because a lot of these communities in BC are small, and everyone knows the farmers and everybody knows the entrepreneurs and business people. And so I think that creates an interesting way of doing business. I think we have an opportunity on Vancouver Island to support a food hub, another food hub here. The one in Port Alberni is based on seafood and kelp production. So we've got seafood being processed, and then the availability for kelp to be dehydrated. And of course, kelp is one of these up and coming amazing products as we start to see more licenses for kelp farms on the West Coast. It's a nutritional supplement, it's used in cosmetics, and it's used as food. And this is something that's in demand all around the world. So we have this opportunity in British Columbia to be supplying an international market, which is really important as well. But at the same time, feeding ourselves, which is very important. So I think that that's probably as far as I'm going to go on the policies that we've been putting in place from my perspective on that support resiliency. And I think we're going to have to continue to adapt. I think what we've learned from this pandemic, the first wave hit us, we figured out how to manage that in 6 months the best that we could. The second wave seems to be coming on even stronger, but we've learned a lot of lessons from the first wave. But I think we all understand, or we should understand, that there will be continued changes happening, and government has to be nimble. We have to be able to respond to the new challenges that are coming up. We also have to be able to support businesses that want to take advantage of filling the gaps that we've been able to identify. So it's a shared partnership, I believe, and we're going to continue just to make sure that we do the best we can as government to be there for our business community. I'm very excited to see what the future holds. And I don't know who's going to be the Minister of Agriculture. We find out all of our cabinet postings next Thursday. But regardless of where I land, it's so amazing as the MLA for Saanich South to be able to work with the business community here on the South Island. So many exciting ideas coming up. And I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Popham. That was really phenomenal. It talked, we hit on so many major themes that are, critical to the conversation we're having about recovery and resilience. And of course, our food sources have become more than ever, I think, very front and center in terms of how important they are and how fragile sometimes these supply chains are. And so this pandemic has really brought that into focus. And a lot of your comments helped us see some of the complexity there. So thank you. We have quite a lot of questions, and I'm going to do my best to get through a lot of them here. And we'll probably go about a few minutes over just to make sure we can get enough questions in there, but we've got a little extra time today. So I hope that's okay. So my first question that came in is about, looking at, we've heard over the last few days, the huge Asia Pacific trade deal. And of course, we're looking now at the US, the new Biden administration, and wondering, what's that going to mean for Canadian trade relations, and will there still be a little bit of this protectionism that remains? So the question here is really about, do you see BC remaining competitive in that way? And also I'm going to tie it into another question about interprovincial trade, something that you would know something about with regards to, wineries and and other alcohol, and how do we sort of facilitate more harmonization of our trade policy across the country?
Well, those are great questions. I'll just touch on the second one first. So the interprovincial issue with wine and alcohol, this has been going on for so long. It's something that we continue to work on with the federal government, but it's slow going. And so that leads me to the first question around trade deals and if we're going to remain competitive. I think what we've learned, especially over the last 9 months, is how fragile our relationships are internationally if a crisis happens, but also if a trade deal changes. I mean, the US is going to be doing what they're going to be doing. I will say that I'm really pleased to see the change in the United States. But it leaves some questions on where are we going to be once the new administration takes over. It's a very fragile situation. And I can tell you that the more resiliency and stability we bring into our domestic market, it allows us to have the ability to have more, to be a little bit more brave on the international front. And it allows us to withstand changes. And I'll give you a example of that. We have most of our seafood production, especially shellfish, ends up into the United States, into the restaurant market. Of course, what happened over the last 9 months is that fell apart, and our shellfish producers were put in a very difficult spot. The other producers that we have, there's a company up on Quadra Island called Walcan Seafood. Their entire business plan was based on an international market, and that broke down in February, and they changed to a domestic market model. And they will never go back now to a full international market because they've found some stability for themselves within the domestic market. People in British Columbia haven't been able to access the type of seafood that we normally send overseas for that market, and people are enjoying it. It's easy to access, they deliver it right to the doorstep. They will wade back into the international market when they can, but that's why the work that we're doing on the domestic front is so important. Are we going to remain competitive? Absolutely. Are we going to take advantage of every international situation that we can? Absolutely we are, but we can't count on it. And so that's why the domestic stability is important.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Thank you for that. I have a question in from Bern Raincock from Alberta. And he has an interesting question about how Alberta and BC can better work together and integrate and coordinate agricultural training and thinking about infrastructure. So a good point here, our crops are complementary, and how can Western Canadian agriculture seize this moment together?
Great question, and we need to work together for sure. You know, there's one issue that I'll have worked with on the Alberta front that I think we could do a lot more work together on, and that's around our pollinators and our honeybees. We do have some agreements cross-border on how we can move hives. Alberta hives come into BC for pollination and often for overwintering, and we've seen some hiccups along the way with that relationship. Alberta, of course, has an incredible apiary school and research facility. And so that's one area specifically that I think we do need to work together on in a bigger way. All of our crops that we depend on, not all, but a lot, depend on pollinators, and we have a colony collapse happening internationally with bees. And so the more work we can do together on that, and that includes looking at the issues of pesticides that our provinces use, just general disease, having a regiment of supporting our beekeepers in ways that they haven't had. Beekeepers are usually very, they're off in the corner. We don't usually see them. They're often quite shy, but I've been able to create a network of beekeepers around the province and give them even just small bits of support around cleaning their equipment so disease doesn't transfer. That's the sort of thing that I think we could have Alberta-BC partnership on.
Right. Okay. So another little bit of a different perspective here. Important question, a big topic. A question from Matthew Wood. We're looking at the question of Agritech and how technology can help facilitate some changes in the supply chain. I think what comes to mind is sort of Amazon getting into groceries. Amazon is into everything, but now groceries too. So how can the BC government support moving, integrating some of this technology so that we are more resilient?
Well, that's an excellent question, and one I'm really excited about. So we are absolutely embracing Agritech in a way that we haven't done before. Been having a lot of great conversations with Agritech companies. Agritech, it exists in British Columbia, but it's not really been highlighted in the way that it should be. And it's definitely going to allow us to produce food in a different way. And a lot of people, the critics of Agritech think that it's just for large corporate farming, but we see that the technology that comes with Agritech also it supports small, medium, and large scale producers. And so the more that we can create opportunities for Agritech to be successful in BC, the better off all of our producers are going to be. We have an amazing Agritech company in Vancouver called Terramera. And they have been doing trials up in an organic vineyard up in the Okanagan, where a camera actually takes pictures of leaves and identifies when powdery mildew is about to start, which is the bane of most grape growers' existence. And it allows for the controls for powdery mildew to be used in smaller amounts. And so we see a reduction of pesticides. We see definitely more positive outcomes in crops because you're getting ahead of disease cycles. And so, yeah, so Agritech, there's so much we can do. And if I am lucky enough to be the Minister of Agriculture, again, that's a file that we're going to expand a lot.
Fantastic. Okay, so I have probably time for about 2 more questions. I'm going to jump over to Ben Clark, who's asking, how much is government and partners, how much are they tracking social and environmental factors such as carbon, etc., to be able to look at the economic impact of local food systems around the province?
So that, again, is something that we had in our platform this time, and something I've always been quite interested in, and it's embracing the idea of regenerative agriculture. And so this is looking at the potential that agriculture in all areas of the province has to sequester carbon. We haven't really delved into that very much here in BC, and in fact, I think federally, the science was a few years back that we've sequestered as much carbon as we can into the ground, but now there's science that's showing that that's actually not true. So we're going to be working with some Agritech companies looking at how we can embrace and partner with landowners to look at carbon sequestration techniques, which could offset some of the negative sides of agriculture. Agriculture gets blamed a lot for being one of the culprits with our climate change problem, and there's valid reasons for that. But agriculture can also be one of the solutions. And I think when you look at regenerative agriculture, that's probably where we would be heading. So we're setting up a regenerative agriculture network, actually.
Okay, great. Another sort of final question here coming in from David Burns. He's wondering about why the majority of agri-food products are being focused on foreign international markets, being exported, as opposed to looking at supplying regional markets. And, the BC government does quite a lot with buy local and so on. I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on how we support the domestic market.
Absolutely. So I think that has been the case in the past, but we've really shifted things over the last 3 years. I can just tell you about, so the food hub that we've supported for Salmon Arm, there's a wonderful company up there that makes a roasted barley tea, and they roast British Columbia barley and create this, I think it's a tea that's been around for hundreds of years. And they started in their house creating this tea and packaging it and going to trade shows. And it was really a small domestic market. they are going to be moving into one of these food processing hubs. And so they're just getting started. They've created, and we've supported through a BC partnership, ways for them to promote themselves to British Columbians. And so British Columbians are already on board, but that's not where the work stops. I absolutely have been putting everything I've had into creating this domestic market and attaching consumers to our products. But we also need to be going internationally. And so our food hubs allow for products and food entrepreneurs to go to that next step. If they just want to stay domestically, that's great. We have tons of support for them, but we also want to support them to move into North America and internationally. But I absolutely agree that the whole purpose of the mandate that I've had over the last 3 years has been to bring stability into the domestic market.